Welcome to the Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth podcast with Gary Helt. Gary is an expert in helping business owners put together a plan that will provide a better future for their businesses, themselves, and their families. On the podcast, Gary interviews other professionals who share his vision, and together they share secrets and strategies any business owner can use to build a better financial foundation for your business and your life.
Hey, welcome back to the podcast. This week, my guest is Karl Maier, and he is the founder of Abunden, and he is an experienced CFO and business advisor who has played key roles in helping companies double their sales in as little as 2 years.
Thanks, Gary. Excited to be here. Look forward to a fun conversation.
Definitely. Give us your background before you started Abunden, before you were helping these companies, grow their sales like that. And we'll get into that. What's your background? What got you into all of this?
Yeah, my college was economics, and I did the MBA right after that. Went into consulting with one of those big accounting firms, did the corporate world, got hired by one of the big banks as one of my clients, and did that for a while till my family kind of twisted my arm to join the family business. So I became the CFO of an industrial distribution company.
Okay.
And we did that, had some real good growth for a few years, and then my dad was like, that's plenty. It's complicated enough. And it's like, wait. And so eventually went some different ways, did some entrepreneurial stuff, then did some CFO work full-time, helped another company grow 7x in 4 years, and, had a lot of fun with that. And then worked through a regional firm doing fractional CFO work for a while. And then that I was through a CPA firm, so they've got their rules, which are good and important, but I've got a lot more flexibility working on my own, and so that's how it became Abunden.
Great. What is it about helping people grow their business that really gets you jazzed?
I've seen some great successes. I've also seen some pretty close personal acquaintances, associates, friends that have not done as nearly as well as they might have. And that just kind of hurts. And so if there's some way that I can help them avoid some of those pitfalls and maybe even succeed a little bit more, then that feels good. That's rewarding. It really just hits something personal with me.
What systems are you using to help them grow their business that much and that quickly?
Yeah, there's a few different things that are available. I kind of got my tool belt, and it depends on the situation as to which, do you need the screwdriver? Do you need the hammer or the wrench? And so I kind of bring some different tools into the situation. Sometimes it's, we've got a good business, but we don't have the funding. Maybe we need to get a bigger loan or an investor or something to help kind of move to the next level. Other times it's like we're generating enough cash and we're growing well, but it's getting kind of crazy here. So it's like, let's build the systems, let's build the processes, let's build the machines so you don't go crazy every time there's a new order and things just can work. And then other times, there's a little bit of the, kind of management process. It's managing the people. So that, it's just different than managing the process, the building or the production. It's managing the people and getting them organized and, keeping everybody moving in the same direction. And so some combination of those tools tend to be, what I bring to the table.
As you're helping these companies grow, how much of the slowdown, I guess I'm going to be nice and call it that, is it that the owner is causing because they can't get out of their own way?
Well, there's a range. In some cases, that's a big part of it. With my father, love him to death, but, he's a sales guy, and he's, got an awesome sales background, really, really good at it. And so that's fantastic. But he really doesn't like managing things. And so, he just kind of pushes that aside, and that leaves kind of chaos in the wake. And so, for him, the decision became, do I try and do the management? Do I delegate the management? Or do I just not grow anymore? And so for him, his decision was, I'm just not going to grow anymore. Other people that I've worked with, a gentleman that does medical testing, blockage here, a very valuable service. And he was working really, really hard. He'd been running the company for about 15 years, but the management team was like really him and his wife. And they had, including part-timers, like 70 people.
Wow.
And, there's some procedures, but nobody knew where they were at. It just was like, well, he was eating too much. He was, his health was suffering, back problems, and he wasn't making nearly as much money as he really could have. And so we really went through and built some of the management systems. We also, cleaned up some of the financial systems and helped him kind of organize and a little bit of strategy there. And, okay, let's focus on certain things that are really going to move the needle. And so we focused on certain regions, and the company did great. What I guess grew like, 45, 50%, that first year after we started putting this in place. And, his wife was real happy because, he was losing a little weight, he was sleeping better, his back didn't hurt, he had a little more time, so you could just see that stress level coming down while results were getting, moving up. So, yeah, those are the owner manager, generally the companies that's your number one limitation.
Right.
The people under you can only do, unless you help them get there. So,
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that with a lot of business owners, they may be good salespeople, they're not good managers, or they're great managers and they're terrible at sales. And lots of times, I think that they're afraid to hire for their weakness because then they don't have control.
right.
And I think that, obviously there's a clear distinction between owning a job versus owning a business. And I think you probably run into that quite a bit. How does your approach to cash flow help the businesses predict kind of their either failure or growth?
Right. Yeah. The interesting thing is, cash flow is really the reason companies fail. It's not sales or profits. You can get by without one or the other of those for a while, but if you don't have the cash flow, you're toast. And so, there's a couple of key tools for managing the cash flow in my toolkit. One is the 12-week cash flow, looking out 8 to 12 weeks. It's common, it's not like a secret, but not as many companies use it as I might expect. And it's just, you're like, well, why do I look out 12 weeks? I know how much cash I've got in the bank, right? Well, if I've had that question a
Oh,
number of times. There was a food distribution company that was having really tough cash flow. And, they're like, why are we doing this again? And so we started putting in place. I'm like, okay, if we know 2 or 3, 4 weeks ahead of time that we're going to be tight on cash, we can call up that vendor, we can call up the meat company and say, hey, can I slide a week?
right.
And rather than get the call from them and go, well, when are you going to pay us? Sure, you can slide a week. Thank you for letting us know. Yeah, we can manage that. And then that bought you an extra week. Everybody's got less stress. You can actively manage if you've got that information. To me, that's your first line of defense. The second is a little bit more of a longer range. What are our seasonal cycles? Let's make a maybe month by month projection for a year or two so we can see, well, if we do grow like this, what's going to happen? Are we going to need to borrow more? Are we going to have to talk to the bank about a bigger line of credit? Do we need another piece of machinery? And what does that do to our cash? So that's kind of the next line of defense. So I think those are the two main tools in my toolkit for the cash flow.
Carl, one of the things that I wanted to talk about, with you, and I run into this all the time, and I'm sure you do, is that If someone is someone's accountant or bookkeeper or CPA, whatever title you want to give them, they think that they should be able to do all of these things for them at, you know, not as separate engagements, but I'm hiring you as my CPA, so you should do everything that falls under financial side of things. Can you talk about that and how you work with someone who has a bookkeeper already or maybe has that CPA tax prepared type already?
Right. That's a great point, Gary. I've got a company, it's a chemical distribution company, and they understand the importance of keeping your books. And so, you know, that's great. They've got kind of a in-house, accounting person, make some entries. They actually have a CPA to do the taxes. So that's good. But then they're like, well, wait, what else do we need? Isn't that it? So that's the first thing, it's like, well, who's going to project your cash flow? It's like, oh, I don't know. I haven't thought about that. They've got a number of different, with the chemicals, they've got a number of different products that are like mixtures of different raw materials. And what's this actually costing us? And what's the profit? Where are we making the money? And where are we losing money? And it's like, well, who's going to do that? And it's like, oh, yeah, that is different. Okay, well, if you can do that, can't you do the taxes too? And it's like, well, tax accountants, they actually have their whole different set of software, and there's a lot of learning. I have a high level understanding of tax, and I know kind of what to watch for to go, okay, we need to bring in our tax expert to help us here. So, yeah, it's a lot like building a house. Well, I can do the sheetrock, but I'm not going to do the plumbing, and I'm sure not going to do the electric. So
Yeah.
somebody else got to do the AC.
Yeah. I think that lots of times, you talked about cash flow. We haven't talked about that B word that everybody's afraid of, budgeting. But that's something, can your tax preparing CPA do that for you? Yes, but that's not what they're good at.
Hmm.
That's not their expertise. What are some of the other things that you do for these companies when you come in to try to help them?
Right. It is systems. Right now, I mean, we hear all the buzzwords about AI, and AI is actually, I mean, on the one hand, I'm like, oh, I can ask whatever AI thing, Chat GPT or the Google version, hey, what's the name of that rock band I forgot? That's handy, maybe, but that's not a business productivity thing. But what we're starting to see is AI can be built into processes. Like you can, rather than having a person type everything into a form, you can have kind of a write-up of something, and then AI can put that into the fields for you. And so we're seeing some pretty neat ways to make things work better with that AI. It's not like, oh my gosh, it can think, it just can make life easier and be pretty cost effective. So but building those systems was a way to, keep track of information, share information. So now you get reports and you can really understand, well, they say working on your business as
Right.
opposed to just in your business, right? And those tools are available. You don't have to be, a giant billion-dollar corporation to afford them these days. They're available, just for, a few people in the company. So, the getting the right systems is really helpful. Getting the right funding. The interest rates are kind of creeping up, and it's a little harder to get bank loans than it used to be. And, how you present your case to the bank or other non-bank lenders is also an option. How you do that and knowing just like we're saying, the plumber does something different than an electrician. There's different types of financial institutions, and some like to make these type of loans, like a real estate loan. Others like to make working capital to fund your inventory, and they have different price points and depend on industries. And so knowing where to play and who to give a call to, that can be really helpful to help companies continue their growth. So, I've got a variety of tools, and within that, it's just which one do you need at different points in time. There's a trucking company I did some work with, and they did great up to a certain size, but then they kind of grew to the point that they'd outgrown their management. What is the restaurant story? If you've got one restaurant, my grandfather ran a restaurant, so Texas Cafe. And so, Tex he could keep an eye on the service people and, make sure the waitresses are keeping up with what they're doing. He could peek into the back and he could see that the cooks were keeping up with the orders. And of course, he was running the cash register. So, and that worked great for him. But if there was going to be Texas Cafe number two, he needs a whole new system to
Right.
manage that because he can't be at two cash registers and all that at the same time. So that's, I'll see that a lot. There's a staffing agency. They'd grown to a certain point. They'd been growing great. And then they're like, got stuck 3 years in a row. Their revenue was flat. And they're like, what's going on? And it's like, come in and, you don't say, oh my gosh, what are you doing? You just say, hey, why don't we look at this? And one of the things I really want, kind of the philosophy of how to, work with a company is, maybe we can make one change in a month. And if we make one change in a month, each month for a year, and even if we don't make every month, but we that's our target. So if we make, let's say 9 changes in a year, I mean, that adds up and the impact is phenomenal. So when I go in, a lot of times I would say, we're going to take 6 months and you're going to look at the financials and you're not really going to see any results, but it's going to feel a little different. And so after 6 months, we've got 3, 4, 5 different changes we've implemented. And then all of a sudden things start to change. Several times I've had that happen. 6 months, nothing. All of a sudden sales start creeping up. And then by the end of the year, they've grown quite a bit. And then that continue, and we keep making a few more changes. By the end of year 2, all of a sudden it's like we grew a good 25% in the first year and 40% in the second year. We've basically doubled sales.
Right.
It's like, and it's rarely like, oh, you've got one thing that you're doing wrong. It's always a bunch of little
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
Life's like that.
Yeah, I can imagine that when you're going in and you're helping them, if they don't have set systems already, and you're helping them fix that. So at the beginning, maybe they don't see the sales going up, but they're having less problems and less mistakes and things like that because you're helping them put that system in place and have that safety net under there in case something does fall through. Hey, we catch it here as compared to 6 months
Yeah,
down the road when, oh shit, there's nothing we can do about it. So I think
yeah.
some of it, a lot of it has to do with shoring up the foundation before you can start building.
Right. Landscaping company that I've done work with, but talking to them recently, and they're like, we do the payroll. We use QuickBooks and we basically do all the filing internally with our people. But every now and then something screws up and the 941's a mess and who do we call? And it's like, what I'm kind of suggesting is we're going to put this payroll system in place that it's not super expensive. It's a little more expensive than what you're doing,
Right.
but they take care of all that stuff. And it's like, you know, if we can just avoid that one thing that screws up and you spend, 20 hours fixing one thing, it's worth $60 a month or whatever the, number might be. And you start adding that up over multiple different things, it's like, wow, your productivity just went through the roof.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that I tell people all the time. When it comes to payroll, man, don't mess with that because besides the amount of time it's going to take you to fix it, the penalties that you get hit with, they may give you that get out of jail free card once to help with the penalties, but otherwise the penalties and stuff are tremendous when it comes to payroll. So that to me is the number one thing, just because I've run across it too many times and somebody saying that with QuickBooks, oh yeah, well, QuickBooks is doing that for me. Well, lots of times QuickBooks isn't doing it for you. Yes, they prepare it, but if you don't send it in, then it doesn't get done. That is where it's like either pay for that higher subscription for them to do that or outsource it to a true payroll HR company to do that. Because that's another place I find people are making mistakes in the HR side of things. The penalties with that are pretty severe also.
One mistake, oh, you pay for it. So,
Right.
yeah.
So I could keep going because again, talking about business with me is just a ton of fun and learning the new things. And I'm sure that for you going into these businesses kind of is the same thing. It's just maybe got a different name to it for the different industries or whatever. I'm sure lots of times it's kind of the same problems. What have I not asked you that you wish I had?
Well, I guess a lot of what I do is about helping companies grow. Another thing that I've done is helping companies that kind of get into trouble. And it's kind of two sides of the same coin, right? When things get tight, we're really tight on cash and I'm really stressed out, helping you manage your cash, get back to profitability. And so I guess that would be the other kind of way to look at generally same set of tools.
Yeah, I'm sure that many people are afraid of AI and think it's really going to be replacing people's jobs and stuff like that. And I always look, it's like, well, hey, it's going to help me do things more efficiently. It still needs human oversight because it is not 100% correct, not even close. But there's a lot of processes that it will help you do much quicker, let you be more productive, like you said earlier, working on the business instead of in the business.
Right, right, definitely.
People like what they hear. They want to reach out to you. They want to learn more. How can they do that?
Well, probably the easiest way is to find me on LinkedIn. And, I've got some videos and useful information there. So that's a great way to do it. And you can always go to abunden.com as well.
So tell me, I saw this one on your website, the $10 million growth map.
Yeah, I've helped, quite a number of companies over the years that have, were kind of in that maybe $1 to $5 million range, and maybe they got stuck or just were having some challenges, and kind of using a lot of the tools we've talked about here today to, manage cash flow, manage processes, manage people, so that you can, you know, hopefully double sales over the next 2 years and maybe do that again. And the next thing you know, you're at 10 million or more. And I had a sporting good company that I got to work with. They were just under $1 million. And I think it's about 5 or 6 years later, but they sold out for a nice number and, I bought a place out in the country. So, yeah.
Great, that's pretty cool. One of the things I want to point out to the listeners is that everything that you've talked about growing the business. I haven't heard you once say about going in and cutting cost. Most CPAs, CFO types are talking about cutting costs. So, this is truly, you are trying to help them grow their business. During our conversation, you've never once mentioned that. And I want to make sure I point that out because, like I said, many times CPAs, CFOs, and that's why there's a lot of us that aren't running bigger businesses because of the fact that that's our MO is cutting costs to create a better bottom line instead of worrying about raising that top number. So I commend you for that.
Great observation. I appreciate that. Good.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Gary. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Hey, this week my guest was Karl Maier, and he is the founder of Abundant. Check him out on his website, abundant.com, and look for that $10 million growth map quiz. And I'll talk to you guys next week.